All right, as everyone's funneling in, my name's Christine Lang. I'm with SDSU Extension, and I've been in South Dakota for a couple of years. It's been a pleasure getting to know so many of you over the weekend, and I hope everyone's made at least one new friend or gotten, by golly, I hope you're walking away with more than one tip to try on your farm or your business, or for any of you who are friends of farmers in the audience, that you're walking away with some ideas to plug into our local food system. We're really grateful. As a member of the conference planning committee, I just really want to thank all of our sponsors and vendors and chefs. We've eaten very well this weekend. Hopefully everyone's walked away with some resources, and our conference wouldn't have been possible without all of our sponsors. And since I now see her in the room, nope, don't go anywhere, Katie, come back. I want to acknowledge the hard work of the entire conference planning committee, but will we please give a warm round of applause for Katie Stahl, who provided incredible leadership. This conference would not have happened without her stepping up to the plate, so we're so, so grateful. Okay, I think more people are going to slowly but surely funnel in. So it's with incredible pleasure that I am welcoming Hannah Breckbill as our keynote speaker. Hannah drove all the way over from Decorah, Iowa, where she is a first-generation farmer and founder of Humble Hands Harvest. And Humble Hand Harvest is a unique farm in that it's worker-owned. They raise organic vegetables, pastured pork, grass-fed lamb for local markets. They have a lot of trees planted. They're forward-thinking in terms of perennial crops. And as someone who has been to Hannah's farm, I can attest to how beautiful it is and how regeneratively minded they are on their farm. The other things to know about Hannah is she has mentored a lot of aspiring and beginning farmers and helped a lot of farmers gain access to land and be able to farm. Also, in partnership with her cousin Emily, she has conducted countless on-farm trials in partnership with Practical Farmers of Iowa. So if you join Hannah's session later this morning, you'll maybe hear some of those on-farm experiments as well. So she is someone who through and through models community, has gained national recognition, has been recognized by the Moses Organic Farming Association, now Marble Seed for her work in building community. And so without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Hannah Breckbill, who's going to be talking about relying on each other, the practice of community.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today in South Dakota, which is a state that I grew up in Nebraska, so I grew up a little bit south of you all, and now I farm in Iowa. So I'm in a new spot, and I'm honored to be here on this land that is unceded territory of the Oceti-Sakowin. Yeah, thank you all for welcoming me to your community. Yeah, I come from Northeast Iowa, what is now called Northeast Iowa. It's also land that is the ancestral homelands of the Oceti-Sakowin, also of the Meskwaki, and also of the Ho-Chunk people. And the land that I farm now was pre-colonization. It was oak savanna. There were oak trees with prairie essentially under them, and one of the most kind of productive and fertile biomes that there is. And when colonization came around, when white settlers moved into Northeast Iowa in the late 1800s, they tilled everything up and planted it to wheat at the time, actually, their actions caused a lot of erosion. So the way that white settlers were farming was, I would say, misguided at best and extractive at worst. And so when I think about what I'm here to do today as a farmer, I think about regenerating that and restoring some ecosystem and some community. I feel like colonization has not only disrupted human communities and displaced and caused genocide to human communities, but it also did the same thing to the land. And yeah, so I just want to acknowledge that whole history and where that places all of us as farmers. We need to think about farming in a new way than our ancestors did, or in a different way than our ancestors did. As white people, I'm speaking for white people here. Anyway, here I am. I am a farmer. As Christine said, I raise organic vegetables and pastured pork and grass-fed lamb, all for direct market. I sell to farmers markets and through a CSA. And I've been at it for 10 years. So I'm starting to get into out of the beginner farmer territory and into the I kind of know what I'm doing now a little bit. Yeah, so, and I'm here today to talk about building community, which is just a very big topic. And yeah, I'll say that I hope the stories that I have to offer can inspire you, or can kind of catalyze a little bit of interest in you in terms of what you can do in your communities and your places to make the world a little bit better, to make the lives of the people around you a little bit better. So I have plenty of stories, most of them surrounding my farm and the way I accessed land. And so yeah. Anyway, I hope that they're of use. Yeah, and also I want to say that a lot of my stories that I have are kind of technical, are a little bit like, business structure-y and finance moving around and that kind of thing, which I am super jazzed about. I totally nerd out about that kind of thing. But when we actually talk about building community, there's something like a lot more foundational than that. Those kind of technical details, right? Building community is about connecting with people and connecting with place in the land. And yeah, so one thing that I thought about when I first started thinking about this talk was a number of years ago, my neighbors were about to have a baby. And my co-farmer just noticed aloud, like we knew the baby's parents, they were neighbors, and we also knew all of the baby's grandparents. And everyone was so excited for this baby to come into the world. And we just wanted that baby to be here. We wanted the very best for this child. And my co-farmer said, what would it be like if we felt that way about everyone? Not just this baby, but like everyone. We were so excited for them to exist and to be part of our lives and to come into our worlds. So I think about that when I think about building community. There's something about having people, seeing the people around you as a gift, and as something to be treasured and something to do your best for. So that is, I'm like a very I'm not complete with figuring out how to do that, right? But that's an aspiration of mine. Is like how can we treat all of the people around us in that way, in the way we would treat a new baby. And community is like that. It's about accepting the people who are around you and thinking about how to make their lives better, along with yours, like to get better together kind of thing. And I also wanted to tell about Give a quote from Adrienne Marie Brown. She says, "You can move at the speed of trust," which is another thing that, I need to remind myself of when I get all up in the technical details. I can want to just move right now on a new idea or new business venture, but the best way, the most like sustainable way for something to move forward is for everyone involved to trust each other and to know what's going on and to be able to move forward together, instead of just a few people launching out by themselves individually. So there's my kind of long intro. And yeah, I want to start with just a very simple story of me starting farming, and what that took, and starting my farm, Humble Hands Harvest, on rented land. So I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, not a farmer at all. I went to college. I was a math major, so very abstract academic world that I was in. And then I decided about halfway through college that I really needed to do something real in the world. I wanted to impact real people with what I was doing, and my math academics didn't really feel like that was going to move me in that direction. So out of college, I got a farm internship, and I started growing vegetables, and kind of felt like, oh wow, everyone needs to eat. This is a really useful thing to do, right? And so that's what the trajectory that I put myself on. I ended up moving to Decorah, Iowa, where I live now, because following my girlfriend at the time, and I just figured I could find a job anywhere, and I did. I found a job on a vegetable farm in Decorah, and I worked there for a couple of years, and learned a lot. I worked for Chris Blanchard, who some vegetable farmers may have heard of because he had this amazing podcast. But so I learned a lot from him. But about a couple of years into working for him, I was like, wow, it's super interesting because to develop a career as a vegetable farmer, you either work for someone else growing vegetables or you own your own operation. There's like rarely an in-between between those things. So I started feeling like, okay, I've kind of maxed out my interest working for someone else. Now I need to do my own thing. It's just a really big leap to take. But I was able to take that leap as a young person. I was 25 at the time. I was able to take that leap thanks to a farm that put out an opportunity. So this farm was a rotationally grazed like cattle farm. They also had some pigs in hoop buildings, and they had this meat business, and they were selling their meat to restaurants in the Twin Cities, and so they were taking trucks up twice a week to the Twin Cities full of their meat. But they also had room on their trucks for more things for the restaurant. So they thought, wait, what if we offered one of our 2-acre paddocks to a vegetable farmer to grow, and that vegetable farmer could send their stuff along on our trucks to these same restaurants. So they put out that offer, which was really, really cool and generous of them. And it was a neat thing because it didn't really take anything away from them other than 2 acres of grass on their farm. And it enhanced their business, and it launched a new business. So when I heard about this opportunity, I I was in the right place, I was in the right mindset, that I jumped on it and I started farming as Humble Hands Harvest. That was in 2013. And I was primarily selling food to these restaurants in the Twin Cities via my landlords. So really cool idea, and I really want want anyone who kind of owns land and already has a business to think about ways that they can include other people, and help launch other businesses that can complement theirs. It was maybe a unique situation, but I bet it could be replicated in other ways in other places. So that was where I first started farming, and from there I kind of developed a CSA in Rochester, Minnesota, and I started going to farmers markets and that kind of thing, in addition to continuing to sell vegetables to these restaurants. And I started developing myself, as a farmer and knowing more about growing vegetables and what it took for me to do that. But I also knew that I didn't want to be growing vegetables by myself long term. I hired part-time help fairly often, but I honestly started to burn out, and my business wasn't doing as well as I wanted it to, and I was kind of scattered and going to a bunch of different farmers markets and driving up to Rochester with my CSA boxes, and just didn't have time to do everything I wanted to do, and the business was floundering a little bit, and I was personally floundering a little bit. And a friend of mine asked me one day, she was just like, "Are you gonna keep farming next year?" This was in early 2016, early summer, and I hadn't thought of that question. I had assumed I would just continue farming forever because that was what I was doing, and I thought, and I said, well, I guess maybe not, unless I find permanent land to farm on, and I find someone to farm with me. So that's hearing myself say that really made me think, oh wow, I really need to work on these two things. I need to find permanent land to farm on, so that I can really make investments in the soil and in infrastructure and in plant trees and that kind of thing. And I really need to find someone who's willing to do it with me. So I'll tell both of these stories first. Luckily it was able to happen within that year that I was able to find both of those things. And that's why I'm continuing to farm now. But the first thing that happened was that a person, actually my second cousin, randomly had moved to town to work on a vegetable farm, a different vegetable farm from mine, and we connected with each other. We had met each other a couple times before because of our, second cousin relationship, and we connected, and we, I showed her the community, and then I asked her, probably middle of that summer, hey, would you like to farm with me next year? I need a co-owner of my business. I don't want to employ you. I want to collaborate with you on growing vegetables. And she thought about it for a couple weeks, and she said yes. So so by the middle of 2016, I had a person to farm with the next year, and a person who I knew was passionate about vegetables, about growing vegetables. So that was super exciting. And what remained was to figure out the land situation. That's a more complicated story. So I'll back up and I'll talk about this piece of land that I now farm on. Back in 2013, when I first started farming, it was just a cornfield, just a conventional cornfield, 22 acres at the bottom of a dead-end road. And the owners of that land had retired, they had moved to town, and now they were ready to sell that land, and they were putting it up for auction. But the neighbor up the road was really afraid of what might happen with that land were it to be auctioned off, because he was worried that a hog confinement would take that land and come into the neighborhood. And he was worried about his quality of life and then the neighborhood. So what he did was he found out about this auction, and he asked the owner of the land, hey, if I found the money, like what would it take for me to just buy this from you before it went to auction? And she said $5,500 an acre. So 22 acres, it was $121,000 that he was like, okay, I'm going to try to raise this money. And so what he did was he made a business entity, an LLC, and he invited people to join it and to buy shares of this LLC, and each share was worth half an acre of this land price, and so he accumulated 44 shares of people, just general neighbors and other people in the community who wanted to protect this land. And so people just, within the space of 3 weeks, he gathered enough people they all put their money in, and they were able to buy this piece of land. I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time to hear about this project, and so I bought a couple shares with like what was in my savings account at the time. And so I got to be part of this group, this community, who suddenly owned 22 acres of conventional cropland. And then, from that point on, is when I got to figure out, or when all of us got to decide, okay, well, we've protected it from this use that we didn't want to see happening, but what is going to happen on this land? Like that's the real question. And so I obviously was a beginning farmer on rented land. I was like, hey, this could be a diversified farm. Like we could put vegetables here and stuff like that. And back to moving at the speed of trust. These people, most of the people in the group were like, whatever, you're 26 years old. Like we don't trust you to be able to do this. So we basically initially rented the land to be put into hay. So that was a 3-year rental contract. So that was 3 years of time where I had the opportunity to actually develop my vision for what I really thought could happen, which was a diversified farm. And so fast forward 3 years later, I had developed this vision. I was in this place where I really felt like I needed to secure long-term land to farm on, and I had actually bought a few more shares from different people who had been the original shareholders. So I had accumulated a little bit more of the equity of that piece of property, but I didn't have quite enough money to like actually go all the way and buy the whole thing, right? And I was at a point with my business where my business was kind of floundering, and a bank wasn't going to trust me to make that make it all work. So what happened was that a couple shareholders who actually owned 5 acres worth of this land said, Hannah, we want you to buy part of this land and we will sell you our shares at a discount. And so they wanted to drop the price on their shares a little bit, and I was able to ask my uncle for a loan. So, you know, I felt kind of lucky to be in a position where I had an uncle who had enough money to spare that he would be willing to loan some to me, and also lucky to be in this position where this couple wanted to sell their shares to me at a discount, but it all worked out. And so, yeah, that was able to happen. Sorry, I have a cold. Yeah, so, yeah, okay, so regrouping. That was a really amazing thing that this group of people just did, right? Yeah, and so not every community has that opportunity of all these people who have just a little bit of extra money to be able to put into something. But this community did, and they were able to take this risk. So I was able to take 10 acres of that, or 8 acres of that 22, and put it into my name in 2017. And that's when our diversified farm was able to start. So Emily and I, at the beginning of 2017, not only had kind of a farm to start, but we also had a bunch of infrastructure to put together. So, yeah, a farm doesn't just need land; it also needs water, a well, and it needs electricity, and it needs a greenhouse and a deer fence, and all of those things we had to figure out how to put together all at once. Thank you. And I had saved a little bit of money from my years of farming and then having off-farm jobs in the winter. And so I had a little bit of cash to put toward all of these infrastructure things. But but we were still like, a well is almost $20,000 in our area, probably more around here, I don't know. And and so that felt like kind of a big hurdle. And so what we did at that point in time was to ask for help. Some friends agreed to help us fundraise, and we started a GoFundMe, and we had a big fundraising party in our community. And both Emily and I asked our families just for support to get our infrastructure together. And one thing that I feel a little bit like we just asked for money, you know, and people showed up for us and gave us things. They gave us $25, they gave us $500, depending on who they were and what they could do. And I think that is often people don't feel like they're allowed to do that, right? In our culture, people don't feel like they're allowed to just ask for support. But what I found when asking for support like that was that people really wanted to step up, wanted to show up for us, for this vision, for the new thing that was going to happen here. And one person, as she was writing the check, she was like, "You're really giving yourselves a lot of pressure here to like really succeed because like all of these people that are giving you money are counting on you to do that, to follow through with it, which I hadn't thought of in that way. I had thought of it as these people who are giving us money, they're now invested in our farm and in our success. And so we have this whole community of people who are ready to see us succeed and expecting us to succeed. And I think that kind of gives good vibes, right, to the whole situation. Like people were, we were a community project at that point. We weren't just us trying to do our thing, but like everyone had an investment in seeing this thing happen. So yeah, we ended up being able to raise just enough money to do all of those like super foundational infrastructure things like the well and electricity. And we were able to have our first year of farming. So I'm going to pause and get a drink of water here. Yeah, so right now, like fast forwarding to today, I'm actually trying to revive this original LLC that had bought the land and held it. In the years since then, we Humble Hands Harvest, our farm, has been buying back more people's shares, so that we're now we haven't quite fully transitioned all of the ownership of the land to our farm, but it's almost there. So we've been just buying that whole piece of land really slowly over time. So it's basically like these people put in their money and they're basically holding a mortgage, an interest-free mortgage for us as we slowly buy it back. Really cool. And what I want to do is replicate that and figure out how to do that on a different piece of land with a different set of farmers. And kind of keep that momentum going of community investment in land. So right now I'm trying to gather new shareholder pledges to see about buying a different piece of land that we've identified in our county. That would be a great place for a new farm like this. So I'm super excited about that, and I'm also very eager to talk to anyone about what that kind of group buying might take. So anyway, that's a little current present reality. I'm super excited about it, and super excited about the people who are stepping up to say, yeah, I want to be part of this, and I want to help make decisions about what land looks like in our community and who gets to be on it. So yeah, the other thing that the other kind of big picture thing that I want to talk about today is our farm business. So Emily and I, when we first started farming together, I had been farming for several years, and Emily hadn't yet. She'd been working on vegetable farms, but she didn't have any farm ownership experience or business ownership experience. So I was kind of holding a lot of that for us, for the two of us, and I was also holding a lot of our infrastructure and our capital. So when we first started farming together, we basically decided that we were going to have Humble Hands Harvest, the farm entity that we shared, rent land and infrastructure from me personally. So that was a way for us to just have a really simple way of working together and we were both going to put in an equal amount of money to our farm bank account, and then at the end of the year we could split that up and go our separate ways if we needed to. Just a very simple agreement and exit strategy and that kind of thing. And in our first year, Emily planted a bunch of trees, a bunch of apple trees that she had access to on the farm, land that I owned, that was in my name. And she really was like, okay, I want to be part of this long term too. And so we need to create a business structure that's going to allow for that and like really cement that in. Also during our first year of farming, again, I had been in the community for a lot longer, and Emily hadn't. And so when people saw Emily at Humble Hands Harvest's farmer's market stand selling vegetables or whatever, they'd be like, oh, are you Hannah's helper? Or even worse, they would assume that Emily and I were married, which we weren't. Emily was dating a dude at the time. So that was kind of funny and also hard for Emily to be like, it's kind of offensive to be called someone's helper when you're actually a co-owner of the business. So we needed to make a structure that like could really show to ourselves and also to the world outside that we were in this intentional kind of business partnership. And so some friends of ours who had worked in kind of cooperative spaces, like several different friends of mine said, hey, like it sounds like what you are trying to do is a worker-owned co-op. So we looked into that and we discovered that yes, that's exactly what we wanted to do. Just to back up a little bit, cooperatives are businesses that are intentionally made for member benefit. So a consumer cooperative, like a lot of food co-ops or even rural electric co-ops, I don't know if you have those here, those are for consumers to get band together and have this business that everyone has some amount of equity in the business, and they have basically dividends from that business are based on the patronage. So the more you buy from a consumer co-op, the bigger share you get in the profits at the end of the year. A producer co-op, like a lot of farm co-ops, are based on trying to basically usually sell like farm goods, kind of collectively. And the more goods you put in and sell through a producer co-op, the more patronage you get at the end of the year. So a worker co-op is in business for the workers, and for the workers' kind of quality of life and for their employment. And so the patronage that we get, the share of the profits, is based on how much we work in the co-op. So that's a pretty different thing than a conventional business where shareholders, profits are distributed based on how much capital you own rather than how much work you do in the business. So that's what we ended up doing. So I technically own a lot more of capital in Humble Hands Harvest than Emily does, just because I'm 5 years older than her, and so I've had more time to accumulate that. But we work the same amount in the farm business. We're very much equally invested, like full-on invested in what's going on, and so we take the same salary from the farm, and at the end of the year when there are profits, we distribute those profits equally. But as a co-op, we also need to have an exit strategy for each of us, and so that means that when I leave the co-op, the money that for example, when I retire, all of the money that I've invested in the co-op is accounted for and is part of is accounted for as mine. And so then when I leave, the co-op has to pay that back to me. It basically turns into a loan and is paid back to me. So that gives us a like pretty clean exit strategy, and it gives us an onboarding strategy for new members. So neither Emily nor I like to manage people. We're not good at that. We want to work with people. So our ultimate goal is to have up to 4 co-owners of our farm working together, making decisions together, and not having to manage each other or anything like that. So our goal is to have people be able to onboard into ownership of our farm. And that's a really cool thing, not only for, I'm like really excited. We have 2 employees right now who are probably both going to onboard into ownership in the next couple years. So I'm really excited for that to happen, but I'm also excited for what that means about our farm transition ultimately. When it's time for me to retire, our farm will be able to keep going as is with just a new set of people. And yeah, I've watched a lot of farms kind of have to end when their people kind of retire and personally have to end. And yeah, it feels really good to me to be building something that is long term and can last for a long time and is a really easy entrance for new people. So we just ask people to buy in with $5,000, and that grants them co-ownership of our farm. We also ask them to work for us for 3 years before they buy in, so we make sure that we're all a good fit for each other. But that's like the cheapest way to start owning a farm that I have ever heard of. And so it's super accessible for new farmers. So that's my bit on worker-owned co-ops, and I'm really excited about it, and I really want to like support people in thinking about different ways of running their businesses and owning their businesses. So yeah, I'm about halfway through my time, and I think, I'm more than halfway through my time. That's awesome. I'm going to then just kind of wrap up a little bit, say some last things, and then I'm happy to have questions from all of you. So the stories that I had to share, I hope they're able to kind of give you different directions to think as each of you have your businesses, are trying to engage with local foods in the ways that you do. Local food is absolutely about community, right? Because it's about the land and it's about the people, the businesses that are working right there. So I just want to remind everyone that we can move at the speed of trust. We don't have to do the things that fast. So getting to know each other, getting to see each other as people and not just as kind of cogs in a machine to get something done is really important. One thing that I've learned also is to think about the quality of life that you want, rather than just going with what kind of convention is. Like I've been in a lot of been nice. I've been in a lot of business planning workshops and things like that, and it's great to like have people kind of look over your finances with you and ask the hard questions. But ultimately, the questions about finances and stuff are not actually the most important bottom line. The most important bottom line is your quality of life and what you want to get out of your out of your quality of life. So that's one thing that I want to say. And then I think I'll leave it at that, and I'll just say thank you so much for listening to me today, and I hope you all, I'm excited for South Dakota's local food scene and what you can do here with each other. So.
All right, so in theory, I was going to grab that cordless mic and run around and let people ask their questions. That's going to be really difficult with that cord. So if anyone has a question for Hannah, if you're willing to stand up and say it nice and loud so she can hear you, would be awesome. And then we'll have Hannah repeat the question, so it's recorded.
Would you explain just a little bit about the individual enterprises of the farm and which ones?
Yeah, okay, so ask a question about the individual enterprises of our farm and how it's managed. So our primary focus is our 2 acres of vegetables. And so Emily and I kind of have a good tag team relationship in terms of I manage, for example, the finances of the farm. She manages all of the data collection of the farm that we need about harvest weights and that kind of thing. And she manages the wash station. I usually harvest, so that kind of thing. We just each have kind of our roles, but we each also know everything that's going on the farm. We also have a flock of sheep that graze most of the farm rotationally, and there are about 18 ewes we're going into this winter with. So not a large flock at all, but they're fun, and we sell those mostly by the cut at farmers market. And then we also have been raising feeder pigs. So we buy them in every spring, and we raise them on pasture and fatten them up, and then sell those by the cut as well. And Emily and I have kind of alternated. Some years I've been the pig person, and Emily's been the sheep person, and other years it's been the other way around. So we just kind of work with a flow either way. And now we have our 2 employees, and so we have this nice rotation where we work Monday through Friday, but farmers market is on Wednesday and Saturday, and so we rotate who does farmers market kind of from week to week. We rotate that, and then we also rotate weekend chores for the livestock from week to week between us. And so everyone has kind of 2 weekends on, either farmers market or chores, and 2 weekends off in a month. And then the other thing that we rotate around is making lunch for each other. So week by week, one person is in charge of lunch, and so it's really nice to cook for people and be cooked for every week. Other questions? Yeah.
When you're thinking about onboarding somebody new into the business, are you looking for somebody with a different diversified ag interest, such as poultry or something?
Yeah, so the question is, when we're looking to onboard new people, are we looking for someone with a different interest or that kind of thing to expand our farm operations? And the answer is, yeah, totally. It would be really cool to add new enterprises on our farm, and and we've definitely thought about poultry as a thing, and also as a thing that in this current moment between Emily and I, we don't have capacity for, but maybe a new member would be able to have capacity to add that to our farm. One big thing that we've been thinking about a lot over the years is our perennials that we've been planting, and knowing that we've been planting chestnuts and hazelnuts and apples, and they're not in production yet, but they do need some care, and so we've been giving them kind of minimal amounts of care. But once they start producing, we're going to both need more people's attention on them, and also we'll be making more income from them. So that's a really cool kind of scale up for our farm at some point, and probably one of the worker owners will have kind of a focus on perennials. So, yeah.
What kind of tax benefits or disadvantages are there to a worker co-op as opposed to the traditional LLC?
Yeah, so the question was what kind of tax benefits or liabilities or whatever are there for a worker-owned co-op? The answer actually is that our worker-owned co-op is technically an LLC as well. So we're a partnership, taxed as a partnership. So basically tax-wise, we just say that we own the business equally. Even though we have different amounts of capital investments, we say we own it equally, and we kind of take equal shares of the tax liability or whatever. Mm-hmm.
And I'll maybe ask the wrap-up question then. For what's a piece of advice you wish someone would have told you when you started your farm business?
So what's a piece of advice I wish someone would have told me when I started my farm business? Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice is I wish someone would have told me, like it's okay to want what you want. Like I knew that I wanted to work with other people, and I knew also that I didn't necessarily want to work with a romantic partner. I wanted to work with other people who weren't like the typical family farm, and that's kind of pretty weird and pretty out there for a lot of people's imaginations, but that's what I wanted, and it turns out that by living out what I want and by seeking it out, I'm able to kind of attract the people that also want that, and that's been really, really kind of gratifying and exciting for me. So yeah, you're allowed to want what you want and to go for it. That's the advice that I wish I had.
Well, wonderful. Hannah, I want to thank you for sharing your stories and for digging into the details, because even though I'm a scientist, I'm not a numbers wonk. So thank you for sharing some of that. I want to remind everyone that we're going to have a 15-minute break, and the next round of breakout sessions is going to start at 10:15. Also, Hannah's going to get a chance to take a break and catch her breath, but then please join us for the last breakout session here. And again, 3 great breakout sessions. But if you want to hear more from Hannah about how she integrates livestock onto her vegetable farm and see a lot of great photos, please join us for the last breakout session. Hannah, thank you so much for being here.